Hello everyone and welcome back to Code with Beto. I'm super excited about this video because we're going to learn about the new version of React Navigation 7.0, and actually the current version 7.0 is a release candidate, so it will be out soon. But I'm super excited because we're going to be touching and learning about some of the new features like static API. There's a new static API that will allow us to declare our screens and our navigation in a cleaner manner. We're going to learn about that. There's a new feature that allows you to preload screens before navigating. Also, as you can see here on the demo, this is a static screen. And also we have this tab bar that is being rendered at the top of the screen, which is really nice. Now let's actually see the website. We're going to compile this for web, and the new support for the tab bar position, it's great for web use cases, I would say. Maybe to have this sidebar, or even you can put it at the top. But for mobile, I think having the tab bar at the top maybe would be great depending on the use case that you want to achieve. Also, as you may notice, every time that I switch between tabs, there's a new animation. In this case, it's like a translation between screens, which is nice. We didn't have that before, and it's also working on web as well, as you can see. Cool. And as well, we are going to have many things like improvements on type checking when we are using the static API. We're going to dive deep into that. But yeah, as always, guys, if you want to get the source code of this project, just go to codewithbeto.dev. And if you go to the projects, you'll find the latest projects that we are building in this YouTube channel completely for free. You can just go to this page and you'll find the latest code for this example. Once this video is up, you can just click on the project and scroll down and you'll find the download button or GitHub button. All right. As well, if you want to become a master in React Native or React using the latest frameworks like Next.js, or also master Git and GitHub, check out the courses that we have at codewithbeto.dev. Okay, now without further ado, let's start with this video. Alrighty guys, now before we start, I really want to show this blog by the core team of React Navigation, where they are talking about the new features of the version. So if you want to check it out, I will leave a link in the project. But as I was saying before, we're going to have, the static API, which is really nice. And this is going to change the syntax. But the really nice thing about this is that it's going to be backwards compatible, which means you can start integrating this new static API to simplify your code incrementally. You don't have to do it all at once. You can combine static and dynamic navigation. Like, for example, you can nest a static stack inside a dynamic, bottom tab, for example, and vice versa as well. You can embed a dynamic route into a static API, which is really cool. And we are going to actually learn how to do that in this video. We can preload screens. We're going to check this out as well. Like I was mentioning, the sidebar support, this is great. Then we also have the new animations. Let's actually start by creating a new Expo project. I'm going to be using Expo, of course. So in this case, I'm going to be using pnpm for installing dependencies and creating the app, but you can use any package manager that you want. I'll say create Expo app, and then we can specify a template. Because if we don't specify a template, we're going to be using Expo router, which I think will break the navigation if we are trying to use the latest version. So just to make sure that this is going to work, I'll create a new Expo app using a template. In this case, I'll use the blank with TypeScript. So let's hit enter. And the name for this is going to be new React Navigation, and maybe V7, and hit enter. And let's wait a little bit until this is done. Okay, while this is being installed, let's go back to the blog post and I'll copy this. This is going to install the latest version or the release candidate of React Native version 7. So let's go back here. And now the project is ready. Let's cd into this folder. I'm going to clear the terminal and let's go ahead and install the dependencies here. So I'll be installing native next React Navigation bottom tabs. And by the way, I also want to install React Navigation native stack at next as well. So that will make sure that we're getting the release candidate version 7. So yeah, I'll be using native stack and bottom tabs. I think that's all we need. So let's go ahead and hit enter. This is going to take a minute. Once these dependencies are installed, we can go ahead and open this in VS Code. Alrighty guys, so here we have our app. The first thing that I want to do is just run this by saying npx expo start. This will start my server. And by the way, I'm still running the previous one, so I'll stop it and then run this command again to make sure that we are using the 8081 port. Now on the right, I'll just reload this Expo app and this will grab this server and run this hello world application. Okay, so here we have our app. This is how it looks. Now, the first thing that I want to do, guys, it's actually create a navigation. So I create some tabs so that we can check out the new animations for tabs. So to create tabs, it's very easy actually. We can create a function that will contain my tabs. And this is going to be a simple function. So let's say return. Now, before I create some tabs, I need to say tabs, create bottom tab navigator. Now, this is how we usually do it, right? With the dynamic API. And I wanted to, continue using the dynamic API so that we know how can we then nest the new static API with this dynamic API. So this is the dynamic API. Let's go ahead and create some tabs. So I'll have a navigator here, and inside this navigator, I'll have some screens. So I'll say tabs screen, and then we can specify the name of the screen. Now, for the simplicity of this tutorial, guys, I'm gonna be using the same component for all the screens, and I'm gonna be using this app. So I'll just remove the export default. Let's copy this app and use it here. This is going to be my screen. And also because we want to have, some screens, I'll create a couple of these. Now I'll just change the name so that we don't have any errors. This will be my profile. And then we need to export something, right? Because this is the entry point of our application. So I'll go down here and say export default function, and I'll export my navigation. So I'll say navigation and then return, and we can return a navigation container that will have these tabs. So let's create this navigation container here. So I'll say navigation container from React Navigation, and let's put inside my tabs. Now, this is my tabs, and hit save. Let's wait a minute. Now we broke the app. Let's open this again in iOS. Let's go. Okay, and now we are able to see the tabs here. So they are using the same component, and this is the default functionality, right? Every time that I switch between these tabs, we don't see any animation or anything. And this is the really nice thing about this, is that I can set the animation for these screens in the tabs navigator by specifying the screen options. So this will apply for all the screens in this tab, and I'll say animation and set this to shift. Okay, so let's hit save. And now every time that I switch between tabs, I'm able to see this beautiful navigation, which in my opinion looks great. And we can change between shift and fade, for example. So let's fade. So the fade, it's actually hard to see, but if you have, two components that are different, of course, it will look nicer. So let's stick with shift for now. And then we can also say none, right? So let's go back to shift, hit save. And yeah, so you can also specify this animation for one screen only if you want. You can access the options here and say animation, and then select a specific animation for this screen. Okay, so let's just go ahead and leave that as it is. And then let's create a new screen. I'll call this one settings, just for fun, so we have three. And the other thing that I was saying, guys, that I'm super excited is that we also have a bar position. So let's use this tab bar position, and we can position the bottom tab at the top or left, right. So let's use the top and hit save. All right, that's how it looks. Now, at this point, as you can see, this is not very good because it's out of the safe area view for iOS, but actually this will work for um, Android perfectly, I think, and web. So let me run this on web just so that we can see how this will look. I'll press W down here, and this is going to tell me that we need to install some dependencies before we can run this. So I'll copy these dependencies, which is React Native Web, React DOM, and Metro Runtime. So let's install these dependencies, and then we can run again the server by saying npm start, and pressing W will launch a website with our application. Okay, so in this case, you can see that the tabs look really nice and we can switch between them. So this is great for web. I think I would leave them at the top or on the side. So let's say left. Now, if we move them to the left, let's reload this in both the website as well on the on the iOS device. Now this is how it looks on on the iPhone. So this is this is different. Maybe you can work around this if you want, but of course I wouldn't recommend to have this since we have a little space on the right. Now let's see how this looks on the web. So on the web, having this sidebar, it's great. Okay. Now the great thing about this is that we can apply this to specific platforms. For example, we can say platform from React Native, and then select, and I'll select just web. And for web, I want this to the left. And so that means that the default value will apply for other platforms. So in this case, it will stay at the bottom, okay, for iOS. And if we check the website, it will remain here, okay? And if I reload, they are on the side. Cool, so that's it. That's a new thing about the bottom tabs, guys. We have a lot of flexibility at this point. But now let's actually dive into the new static API. So for the new static API, I want to create a stack. Actually, these are tabs. So I'll create a stack. Now, if you are new to React Navigation, and if you are not familiar about these tabs and stacks, don't worry, I actually have a video on YouTube, or you can just go to codewithbeto.dev. In the project, we have this really nice crash course for beginners where we learn React Navigation, and you will learn about bottom tabs, top tabs, how combine and how to nest routes. This is great, and it's available for free in the YouTube channel. Or if you want to go one step above, we also have the React Native course. In this one, we actually have a section just for navigation, and we will learn about stack, tabs, drawers, and authentication flows for more advanced use cases. Okay, so now that being said, let's go ahead and create a stack for this screen. Now we're gonna be using the the new static API, like I've been saying, and the way we can see the difference, it's because we already have this tab, right? And these are using the previous dynamic API. There's nothing wrong about this, but actually there's more boilerplate, and you'll notice in a moment how using a static API will make this easier for us. So let's go ahead and name our stack. We usually do use this function like create bottom tab navigator, but when we are using a static navigation, we can call this one, for example, my stack. We need to say create native stack navigator. Okay. And for this, so we are using basically the same function, but the cool thing about this is that now we can pass an object in here, and we can specify many things like the screens that we want to handle for this stack. Okay, so the screens will be an object as well. And then we can start creating screens, like for example, screen 1, and we can start defining properties for this specific screen, like the component for this screen. So this will be like having this in here, but in this case, we will call it screen. For the screen, I'll use the app as well, the same component. We don't want to get, creating a bunch of screens, but for now, I'll use the same one. And then we can also specify options like, header shown. If you want to hide the header, you can have all the these options that we're specifying here. This is where you would do it. Now, at this point, you may notice, no, this is, I think, in my opinion, cleaner and looks good. And yeah, it allows you to have other things. And then let's create a new screen before we dive into what else we can do with this API. I'll call this one screen 2, and we can have almost the same things. Let's specify the screen, which is the only required thing. And yeah, let's hit save. And now we have this stack, right? So how can we use this new static stack in our tabs, right? Let's say that we want to use that stack instead of this in the home, in the home tab. So the way we can do that is by, previously, if you create a stack, you may be thinking maybe you can just write my stack in here, but this won't work because this is not a component yet. So we need to grab this stack and convert it into a component for our navigation. Okay, so we can say I'll say const my stack and then component, right? My stack component equal to, and we can use this really nice function called create component for static navigation, and then we can pass the static navigation. In this case, it will be my stack. Okay, and actually the second parameter is going to be the display name. So we can say something like, okay, and that's it. Now we can use this component into our dynamic navigation in here. So if I hit save, now I do have, I'm using this static stack defined in here. So if I go to, the app screen, we can navigate between screen 1 and 2, and we can do that by saying const navigation equal to use navigation using the hook. And let's create a button from React Native. Let me delete this status bar. And the title would be go to screen 2. And whenever we press this, we want to say navigation.navigate. Now I want to navigate to screen 2. So let's type screen 2. But look what is happening, guys. We have TypeScript complaining that TypeScript doesn't know what is the screen 2, although I typed it correctly. And if I actually press this, we will be taken to screen 2. But this is the classic error about React navigation. And typing this, it is painful, especially when you have a ton of screens. But because we are using the static API, typing this route is going to be actually very easy. The only thing we need to do is just declare a global type, and we can use the namespace of React navigation. So I'll use the React navigation, and then we can declare an interface root param list. Using the root param list, I want to say that this is going to extend static params list. So we are importing this type from React Navigation Native. We are basically going to infer the type of my stack. Okay, so if I hit save now, I'm getting this error. Oh yeah, because I need to open and close curly braces here. So by saying this, guys, as you notice, the error went away because I'm extending the parameters of the roots of the navigation with my stack screens by using this static params list. Okay, so apart from the error going away, check this out. we have really nice autocomplete between screen 1 and 2. So if I want to navigate to any screen, I can just simply select this screen in here. I won't get any errors. I have type safety, and if I press this button, it works. Okay, it's taking me to the screen 2. This is amazing. I really like this. Just by inferring the type, because we are using technically an object, so we are inferring the keys of these screens. And if we were to declare more complex types for each specific screen, we could also do that. Now, in this case, we are nesting the static navigation inside this dynamic navigation. But if you notice, we have, when I go to the screen 2, we have, this stack inside the tab. But what happens if you want to nest these tabs inside your static navigation? Well, you can also do that, and it's actually very easy. Now, the only thing we need to do is just grab these tabs and just put them in here. Let's say that I want my tabs in the first screen of the stack. Okay, so then what I need to do is just go to my React navigation, and instead of rendering the tabs, now my entry point, let me comment this. Now my entry point would be my root navigation, right? But my root navigation would be my stack, right? So before I can actually use my root stack, my stack, I cannot, this is not a component, right? And I created a component in here, but this was for nesting. And actually, when we are trying to use that as the default entry, we need to use a new method call. So let's name this as root navigation, because that's my entry point, right? And I'll use the create static navigation passing my stack. So what this is going to do is create the root navigation component, and now I can just simply return this component in here and hit save. And yeah, so this will work. Now the issue is that my stack component is inside this, but at this point we don't want this. We want to have the app in the home screen, because at the end of the day we are nesting these tabs in the stack. Okay, cool. So this is working, and now when I go to the screen 2, you notice that we are seeing this screen 2 taking the entire space, because this is not nested inside the tabs anymore. Okay, so this is working fine, and we can navigate between tabs, and from any type, if I want to navigate to screen 2, this will work. Now there's a couple of issues when we are nesting these tabs in the static stack. At this point, we lose the types, right? So if I want to navigate to the profile screen from here, from my screen, I only get autocomplete for screen 1 and screen 2. Okay, and by the way, this is not a good name anymore. This should be maybe my tabs. Okay, so if I change this to be my tabs, let's say screen, my tab screen, then I can just come here and TypeScript will let me know that the name has changed, and this is a better name, right? Now, in order to bring types from this dynamic navigation, I think this is the pain point of using dynamic navigation, that we need to type this manually instead of inferring, right? So let's go ahead and do that, because we have this piece of dynamic navigation. We will need to create some types. So let's start by creating the list of params for these tabs. So I'll call this type my tabs param list. And in order to have this beautiful typed, we need to specify the screen. So let's start with home. Home, we can define, undefined in here. We can do the same for profile, undefined, and I'll duplicate this last one and set settings. Okay, so what's happening here is that I'm declaring the screens that I have, and I'm also saying, these screens won't get any route params, so I'll just say undefined in here. Then we also need to specify, this is the list of params. Now we need to say my tabs props, which will be the props using the static screen props. So let's use this type from React Navigation, and this will take a generic. So we need to say Navigator screen params from React Navigation as well, and this will take another generic, which is the params list. So let's pass this tab param list. Now we can use this type to type the tabs. Okay, these are my tabs. So to type this, we can say that this is going to take my tabs param list as property. Okay, so now we're using, oh sorry, it's this one here. Okay, so the advantage of this is that if I, you know, not in here, but if I want to navigate to the settings screen, let's say this screen. So as you can see here, now I'm getting a warning because my tabs screen, it's actually not just one screen. We have 3 screens. Now, because we typed these tabs using these generics and static screen props, then infer the type of my stack. It's, you know, the root param list, it's inferring the screens inside the tabs. So this is really cool. And now this is giving me an error because I'm not specifying which screen I want to navigate once I navigate to the tabs, right? So let's say that I want to go to my tabs screen in here, but then we can pass an object with the screen that we want to navigate. And as soon as I open these quotes, you can see that I get autocomplete. So if I say that I want to navigate to the screens, to the settings screen, we will have autocomplete. And now TypeScript is not yelling at me. TypeScript is happy because I'm specifying everything. And we know that we have this settings screen. Now, instead of having go to screen 2, I guess we can duplicate this button and have the previous one. So this is screen 2. Let's delete. And if we go to the screen 2, actually screen 2 is just you know, this screen is not requiring any parameters. It's just one component. So yeah, we have screen 2 here, and then we can also navigate to the settings. So go to settings and hit save. Now, if I press go to settings, you can see that it's going to take me to the settings screen, all fully typed. Now, it was a little painful to write these types for the tabs because this is a dynamic navigation. But once we have this, we can infer it from this stack, which is really good. Okay, now we can do these kind of things. And on top of that, let's say that for settings screen, we want to get some data in the route. So I can say, let's say that we're going to pass the user ID in here, and this is going to be of type string. Hit save. Now TypeScript is going to yell at me here again because we said that this screen was expecting some parameters. So inside this same object, we can pass these params, and also we can have this really nice autocomplete, which will let me know that the properties user ID, and I need to specify some ID. So I'll just type some dummy data in here. And this is how you can pass params fully typed to the tabs. Now, if I go to the settings, we will be navigating with these params, and we can then access these params in the route and do whatever we need. Okay, so that's one huge thing. This is how you can nest dynamic navigation into the static new API navigation. And now let's take a moment to see how beautifully and simpler looks this stack against these, you know, these tabs, which has this tab screen and then Navigator, and we have to type this manually. And this is, you know, this is not very clean, but also this is useful, right? Now let's talk a little bit about how we handle authentication with this kind of navigation, right? Because when we're using the dynamic navigation, we usually have something like is user logged in variable, and then we check if this is true. Then maybe we will render the home screen. Otherwise, we will render other screen, right? Other screen in here. And this is not very clean, but it works, right? And it's useful for some cases. But we have a really nice way to handle authentication using a static navigation, and that is using the property if. So property if, it's really nice. It's going to take a function in here, and this function needs to return either true or false. And basically what this if is doing is saying if some sort of validation it's true, then we will navigate to the tabs screen. Okay, so maybe you can have a function like check user, check if the user is signed in, and this will return true or false. So just for the sake and simplicity of this, let's say that this function is going to return false, and I'll hit save. And what happened here? So because this function returned false, that means I'm telling my stack that we don't have a user, right? For example, this function is saying we don't have an authenticated user, so we will fall back to the screen 2. And here we are seeing the screen 2, and I'm not able to navigate to any other screen, which is great. Now let's try to see if we can go to settings. Okay, we get an error. And if I try to go to screen 2, we will get an error as well, because this component is not being even loaded because this is false. So in this case, you can see, you can check, if user is signed in. And also for screen 2, we can have an if as well that will check if the user is signed in, right? If user is not signed in, right? Okay, I'm missing. So if the user is signed in, then we will show this screen, my tabs, otherwise we will show screen 2. Now, of course, this screen 2 is just a dummy screen, but you can have like an authentication flow here, auth flow, and you will take the user to those screens. And yeah, so once this function changes, depending on the state of your logical of your authentication, we can change this to be true. And once this changes, this actually will update the navigation. So if I hit save now, you can see that now we won't be able to navigate to the screen 2 because the user is authenticated. So let's try to do that, and we get this error. Okay, but if you want to actually allow this, we can just comment this and go to screen 2. Okay, so this works perfectly, very clean, just in 2 lines. And yeah, so I'm super happy. I'm super happy for this. Now, one more thing that I wanted to mention, guys, is that, for example, when we are dealing with the authentication flow, let's say that we have a screen. In this case, let's leave screen 2 and let's create a new, maybe like a stack or a new screen for authentication. So I'll call this one Auth screen, and let's just create a simple screen using the same component. So I'll use my app component. And then, in this case, I want to say that I want to show the authentication screen if, if we don't have a user authenticated, okay? And we can specify some options as well, but for now, let's keep it simple, just like that, the authentication screen. Now, in this case, this screen 2 is like floating around, right? So let's say that I also want to keep access to this screen 2 inside these screens. Okay, so in this case, we could have a user authenticated, but then they also can access the screen 2. But we can have a user that is not authenticated, and they can also should have access to the screen 2. So in this case, what we can do is define something called screens, and this has to be outside of these screens. Sorry, in this case, I'll call this screen 2. So in this case, what we can do is create groups, and this stack can take something called groups, and we can start grouping our screens. For example, I can have my tab screen group, for example, or home screen, or logged in user. It's easier to understand, I think. And then this logged in user will take some screens. Okay, so basically what we are doing here, it's just grabbing these groups, and then we can have the logic that we had here. So let's grab let's grab these tabs and paste it here. So I'm creating a group for my tab screen. And then we can create a new group for my logged out user, right? So let me scroll up a little bit here. I'll say logged out. And then we can, do the same, specify the screens. And for the screens, this will have the auth, right? So let's copy the auth and paste it here for the auth screen. All right, and we are creating, screens. Now we want to have access to the screen too in both of these groups. So we can create a new group called common, right? And same thing, we need to specify the screens. In this case, we will have only this screen too. So let's go ahead and copy this. I'll cut this and paste here and delete now this. Okay, and hit save to have some formats. Now, I don't want some sort of navigation or validation that if the user is authenticated or not to access this screen, so I can delete this. And then the thing in here is that we are going to have access to this common screen anywhere from either logged out or logged in. Okay, now we can add the validation. Instead of having this inside this screen in specific, we can have the if in the group. So outside, I can have the if and have the same function. So I'll just cut and paste it here. And now the entire group will be shown, not only this screen, but the entire group will be shown if the user is authenticated. And we can do the same in here for the group. If the group is, if the user is not authenticated, we will show this. And finally, we need to do something in here, because once we change between logged in and logged out, we need to basically re-render this screen so that if we were in this screen when the user was authenticated or was logged out, we will remain in the same screen, because this is not going to re-render, right? We are sharing the same screen for both states, like sign in or sign out. But if I was in the common screen and I signed out, I will be left in the same common screen. So to trigger this re-render, and so that we can take the user to the logged out or logged in screen, depending on the authentication state, we need to specify a navigation key. Okay, and then in here we can say depending on the sign-in state. So we can have a variable like sign in, like is signed in. Then we can specify like user or otherwise guest. Okay, now of course I don't have this variable, but I can say if true, then have this, or depending on this function. So what is happening here is that if I sign out, being in this screen, I will be taken to the either logged out screen, or if I was signed out and then I sign in, I will be taken to the home screen instead of just remaining in this screen, which is good. Yeah, and many other things, guys, and I would actually encourage you to go and check out the documentation yourself. But these are the highlights that I'm super excited about. I think using the static API will help to keep your code clean, keep your code easy to maintain and scalable. Now, there was as well some changes about deep linking. And I don't want to dive into deep linking because I feel like that is a more advanced topic that deserves its own video. But if you want me to create a video just about deep linking with the latest version of React Navigation, just let me know in the comments. Don't forget to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Go to codewithbeto.dev, check out the courses, check out the source code of this video. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.